Hello, I'm Shelby Parchman, Managing Partner of Urban Strategies, and I am going to speak to you today about writing a grant proposal. Today's topic is grant proposal planning. I'll first start this presentation by saying grant funding is not as easy as it seems. Most people think you put in a proposal, you'll get a yes, and someone write you a check. That is certainly not the case. And I'll start with the six myths that I come up with concerning grants. Number one, most people think they're for nonprofits. I have a lot of people say, well, I'll just start a nonprofit organization so I can get some grants. That's not always the case. And we see now that there are a lot of grants available for small businesses. Number two, that there are no strings attached. Anytime somebody writes you a check, there will be strings attached. Number three, anyone can easily get one. You can easily find them, but they're not easy to get. And we'll talk about that a little later. There are grants for everything. I know every time I do a presentation, people come up to me and say, "Hey, I heard there's a grant for this, and that." And it's usually some very, very specific item, or there's tons of grants to start a business. And that is not the case either. Most of the grants you'll see are for businesses or nonprofit organizations that have been around for a while. The application process is easy. You just put it together and boom, there you go. Once again, it's not an easy process. We'll talk a little bit about that. But when you do grant applications, I'm sure some of you may have done so for some of the opportunities that are available. You know the process is not easy. And then a grant can cover all costs. Most grants require that you have some skin in the game, no matter what it is. Either you're already in business and you're producing revenue, and you had a decrease in revenue, you're going to create a job, but you're not going to use all the grant money to do so. So if you're relying on a grant to, say, start a business and you have nothing, that's not going to happen. If you want a grant to take on a new project, and we'll talk about some of those examples a little later, that's not going to happen. There are many types of grants, and we'll start by talking about the most common one, and that's the matching grant. The matching grant is where you put up dollars, the grantor will put up dollars, and then you do the project. Now, they don't write you the check in many instances and say, okay, you use our money, then you figure it out. They want you to have the money together. And a good example is the NOF, and we'll talk about that in detail a little later. Competitive or discretionary funding. And that's usually when they want you to prove that you have some great idea, and that idea is better than someone else's idea. And usually you see that more like in the scientists or technology, where they're looking to create some new technology or some new product. And there are a lot of government grants around that. Formula grants are available as well. I won't go into detail with those because they're very rare. Project grants, and sometimes you'll see that there's some overlap, like the NOF is a matching grant, but it also requires that you have a specific project that you want to do. Continuation funding is when you have a grant and you say, hey, I've done a great job, I need more money, and they'll sometimes award you more money for that. And then pass through funding, which is a lot of ways my organization works, in that we work with nonprofit organizations, we partner with them, and nonprofit organization writes the grant application. They say they're going to use our services in that project or during that grant period. We have an expertise in a certain area, and so that funding passes from the nonprofit organization into our organization, and that's actually one of the ways that we fund a lot of the work that we do in our organization. So how do you find out about grants? Well, I know that when I do presentations, someone will tell me, have a friend who said there are thousands of grants out there. All you need to do is start a business, and people start writing you checks for grants. And that's certainly not the case. But one of the things I always like to say is the opportunities are everywhere and they're nowhere, right? Because people tell you that there are a lot of grants out there. And then when you start looking for them, they magically disappear. But so what you want to really do is look at some of the local and national organizations that give out grants. But you also want to make sure that these grants work within your mission, and we'll talk about that in detail as well because that's really important. But if you want to look at some of the larger grant opportunities. And if you go on grants.gov, you'll see a ton of grants, but they are very, very highly competitive because there are a lot of people out there looking for those. The SBA website will list business grants when they're available. There's another site called Grant Watch, but there are also a lot of local resources. So you want to check your county, your state, your local, but there are also foundations who give grants. And one of the things that you want to be careful about in all of this is that in many instances, the foundations who give grants want to give them to nonprofit organizations who then, once again, pass through to other organizations. So just really do a lot of research in terms of what types of grants you're eligible for before you actually start looking at the application process. And I always tell people, you can't just write a grant. You have to have a specific opportunity that you need to write a grant for. And it's really like writing a business plan. So just make sure that you figure all that out before you get started because you don't want to waste a lot of time in writing these grants. Now, where are the grant opportunities? Well, there are a lot of local ones now, thanks to COVID and the civil unrest and all these other things that have been going on. This has been an amazing time to get grants, and you just have to be very diligent about it and keep doing the research and keep your eyes, ears, and nose open and looking at the what's on the internet and keep researching opportunities. But there have been so many opportunities that have come about. The city of Chicago had a grant program. Uh, Cook County, state of Illinois, they partner to have some grant programs. And if you live outside of Cook County, I know I live in Will County and there was a bunch of grant opportunities out here as well. Allies for Community Business, formerly Axion, they are usually the intermediary in a lot of grant programs. So if you go to their site, they will have grant opportunities that are available. Westside United had some grants available. I don't know if they're currently doing some now, but they usually have a cycle of where they have grants available. And then there's just numerous other agencies around. Once again, it's really a matter of doing your own work. And it's one of those things where if you're going to pursue something, you really have to start looking at those opportunities and doing a lot of research because they just naturally don't fall in your lap. Now, I will say, if you hang out on Facebook, anytime some grant opportunity comes out, there's usually 10, 12, 20 people reposting those opportunities. So social media is a good place to hang out and look for those grant opportunities. And then on the national and federal level, there's organizations that assist in grants as well. One is LISC, and LISC stands for Local Initiatives Support Corporation. And they are a intermediary like Allies for Community Business, Axion, but most of the work that they do is more on the national level. So they handle a lot of the corporate grants that are available right now. Then, of course, Facebook had a grant program and they had a free ads that go along with that. Comcast had an opportunity just recently as well. So you can see there's a lot of opportunities out there now, especially on the corporate side. And there's been a lot of corporate giving. So make sure that you just stay in tune with a lot of those opportunities. And then there's the infamous PPP, which right now is a great opportunity to go out there and get some funding through PPP. It starts off as a loan, but if you do everything that you need to do, it becomes forgivable. And right now, they're relaxing the requirements for PPP, so more smaller businesses can get access to those funds, but not only gain access, but they can actually get more money through the PPP. So make sure you look into that. There are tons of PPP lenders out there, and it shouldn't cost anything. If someone says that it's cost you to get a PPP, and you should run. And then lastly, the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, came with a grant portion as well. And I know right now they're looking to boost some of the grant dollars into businesses that are in certain zip codes, and especially those in underserved and underrepresented communities. I know the bulk of the work that we do with Rush is on the west side of Chicago, and most of those zip codes, if not all of them, are represented there. And then once again, there are so many others, and it's just a matter of how much time, how much energy you want to put into researching those grant opportunities. And then I just want to talk about one specifically, since we're in the city of Chicago, is the Invest Southwest grant initiative. And once again, there's a lot of components to that. And one is the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. And if you own a brick and mortar business or you want to start a business in a brick and mortar, they have dollars available. and specifically in the underserved and underrepresented communities of Chicago. And once again, the West Side happens to be one of those, right? And it's one of those partnership grants where the city will partner with you, but also is a project grant and it's a matching grant. So you can use up to 75, you can use this grant for up to 75% of your project cost. And so, say for instance, if you have a project that's $400,000, do the math, and the city's kicking in a really smooth $300,000 for you to do that. But it's not as easy as it sounds. So it's a good start, but the question is, do you have the $100 or $100,000, or can you borrow the $100,000 to be able to finish off the grant project? And so there are two types of grants in the NOF program. One is the uh, small grant program, and you can get funding up to $250,000 there. So a $500,000 project, minimum is 50%. So $500,000 project, you can get 250,000. If you live in if you live inside those zip codes in those project areas, you live in there, or if you're going to hire someone from the community, they call it the community hiring bonus. If you're going to do that, then they can up it. But the max still on the small NOF is $250,000. So if you go over $500,000 and they're not going to match it 50%, they're still going to give you $250,000. And then there's the large grant. NOF large can go up to $2.5 million, but there are some other caveats to that, and that you have to pay the prevailing wage. You have to have a certain amount of minority participation in the project, especially on the construction side. So these are really grants that are around construction and building out a brick and mortar facility. And then the Small Business Improvement Fund is very similar to NOF, and it's in other communities. And these are all implemented by the Chicago Department of Planning and Development. Go on their website, get more information about NOF if you feel that you qualify for it. But once again, we'll talk about that. And NOF is not going to put money in your pocket. You'll never see these grant dollars. What they'll do is they'll put the money in escrow. You put your matching dollars in escrow, and the project gets started, and everybody gets paid. And if there's money left over from NOF, it goes back to the NOF coffer. So it's strictly for doing work on a specific facility, and they put no money in your pocket. That means that you need to have some working capital and all that other fun stuff. They don't buy furniture, right? So these are the type of things you have to think about when you're applying for some of these larger grants. Then I'd say sometimes you need to think outside the box, because if most businesses can't survive on grant funding alone. I know we're in a great time right now, and there's everybody giving us grants and saying, hey, we want you to do well. But at some point, these grants are going to run out. And I tell anyone, if you're starting a business based on grant funding, then you won't last long in business anyway. So what you want to do is also consider your comprehensive financial plan, right? And say, okay, how do I raise money for my business, and how do I stay in business, especially when these grant funds run out? So I looked at it and said, okay, well, what are some of the alternatives to grants? And one is venture capital. Good luck with that one. So as you can see, has a high level of complexity, and availability is practically nil. So I just wanted to put that up there as an example, but really don't think about venture capital at this point. They're angel investors, not as complex, but not always not as available either, because most angel investors, they will invest in startup businesses, but usually they have, or even existing businesses, but they usually have some type of return that they're looking for, and they're looking for businesses that can scale up. So will you get an angel investor if you're running, say, a small restaurant? Chances are it's going to be very difficult, but someone may be out there to assist you in doing so. A little easier and a little more available is crowdfunding, but there's a ton of competition around crowdfunding. And so you have to really stand out from the crowd in order to get crowdfunding. And then there are loans, and there's tons of loans out there. I just say be careful about the loan that you take. Some come with very high interest rates, and I'm going to talk about some of the safer loans that you can get into when you're looking to borrow money for a business. But usually, loans and personal capital is the way people start businesses, right? But There's one that always overlooked, but I always have to talk about this when I talk about access to capital and alternatives to funding. And that one is revenue, right? So this is the one that's really easy to get, right? It's not very complex. You just go out there and sell more stuff. You say, well, Shelby, we're in a pandemic. How can we sell more stuff? Well, that's when you have to come with that term pivot, which I don't like to use, but you really have to think about your business model because your businesses survive off revenue. They don't survive off grants. So look at your business model now and say, what can I do starting today and going into the future where number one, I can be a little more resilient when tough times come because tough times will come, but also how do I increase my revenue? Because that is where the success of my business is really going to depend on. And if you do that, then sometimes you don't even think about grants, but you can also uh, accelerate your business through revenue because that's the easiest way to grow. That's the easiest way to get investment capital. That's the easy way to get a loan. The more money you make, the more willing people are to do business with you and to lend you money or invest in you. So I did promise local lenders, right? So Allies for Community Business, formerly Axion, they're CDFI, and I'm going to explain that in a few seconds. There's LISC, talked about them already. There's the Chicago Community Loan Fund. There's the Community Reinvestment Fund. There's CNI Microfinance Group. All of these are local lenders in the Chicago area or offices in the Chicago area, and they're looking to lend money to small businesses at low interest rates. And then there's one, and I put CRA, and I'll explain that as well, but that's CIBC Bank because they are very big on lending inside a community. So what does CDFI mean? CDFI means Community Development Financial Institution. And that is a nonprofit lender. It's not that they lend to nonprofits. Most banks don't lend to nonprofits, believe it or not, but these are nonprofit lenders. So they are not like big banks that are looking to make a ton of money off of you. They are committed to investing in community through loans. And so they give you favorable terms. And sometimes it's a lot. In most cases, I would say, I deal with a lot of them. I know most of the loan officers at most of these institutions, and it makes it's a lot easier, and they even have relaxed credit scores for, and sometimes no, they don't even look at credit scores at all in terms of lending. But there are other caveats that come with that. But talk to a lender, help them understand your situation. In many cases, they'll figure out some way to help you. If they can't, they'll tell you what you need to do in order to get help down the road. And then the Community Reinvestment Act, and that's where CIBC Bank comes in. Some banks, like Chase Bank, instead of them following the Community Reinvestment Act, where they would give loans to small businesses and under-resourced communities, they give the money to organizations like CNI, Axion, Allies for Community Business, LISC. They give them dollars, and then those nonprofit lenders will then loan out the money. But some banks want to do it directly, and so they're under the CRA Act, and they just lend directly to those businesses. And one thing I say about CIBC Bank, have some fantastic interest rates, and so those are the type of institution that you want to look at, and really stay away from a lot of these online lenders who are taking a lot of your money in fees and charging you really sky high interest rates because at that point it's very difficult to stay in business if you're paying a lot of your revenue in interest rates. So you know all that. So what are my 9 steps to perfecting that grant proposal? Number one is always paint a rosy picture. No one wants to hear gloom and doom, right? They want to hear that you're going to take this money, you're going to do some good with it. And so let them know exactly what you're going to do and what good that money is going for. And define success in the terms of the grantor's mission. So anytime that you're going to apply for a grant, go on the website of that organization, that foundation, or whoever, and understand what their mission is. Because if it's not within their mission, they're not going to give you the money. So, and then you can take your proposal and try to align it with their mission. And the more aligned you are with their mission, the easier it is to get money. Be very specific about what you want to accomplish. So, if you need money and you want to retain jobs, I want to retain 5 jobs. And if I had this money, if I didn't have this money, I would lay off people. Now that if I get the money, then I won't lay off people. And that's some things that a lot of foundations or grantors want to hear. You're not going to lay off people, or you give me these dollars, I create another 5 jobs. So things like that, very specific. Differentiate your work from others, just like you're writing a business plan, right? Who are your competitors and why are you so much better? In some instances, it may not be necessary, but it just really depends on the grant proposal that you're going for. So if you're going for a proposal, say like one of the projects we're doing, and we are creating an urban agriculture system for the city of Chicago. So we have to prove that our work is a whole lot better than the other urban ag organizations out there. And we were successful in doing so. Keep it simple. Nobody has time to read 30, 40, 50 pages of, the same thing repetitive over and over again. So just keep it very simple. Bullet points are really good. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. This is how we're going to do it. And here are the results that we're expecting from it. Uh, Budgeting, doing the math. Your budget has to make sense. You can't say, well, I want a $400,000 grant and I'm going to pay myself $300,000 of it, right? That doesn't make any sense. But you want to make sure that you have uh, expenses that align with the project objectives. And these are expenses that are in line with ordinary expenses, right? So you can't say when you're in an area and the rent's $3,500 a month on average, and you say, I'm going to go rent an office for 10,000 a month. Well, that's not making sense to the grantee. So you just have to make sure that your numbers fall in line with what's normal and expected. And then pay attention to the details. So you want to be consistent throughout. The same message over and over again. Make sure you have a proper cadence and everybody understands in every section what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. But it should be the same message through and through. And that's the same thing you do with marketing, right? So grant proposals are just like business plans. If you look at it like that and saying, I'm writing this business plan, proving to someone that they should give me some money, right? So people write a business plan to get a bank loan. Business people write a business plan to get an investment. A grant proposal is really a different way of writing a business plan, and it's just the audience is different, right? Then have your financials ready. I know if you apply for the PPP, they want to see your tax records. They want if you have payroll, they want to see your payroll records. All these things, and the quicker you can pull them up, the easier it is to get. I know with the PPP on the first round, they ran out of money, and those who were still looking to or were trying to build their financials, they got left in the dark. So it's very important to have all this stuff together. So when you're doing a grant application, when they say we need your last 3 years financials, you just attach because they should be in a file easily accessible. We need your payroll records attached, just like that. It should be that simple. But as a business owner, you should have it that simple anyway, right? You shouldn't have to look for financial records if you're a business owner. And review and edit is always good to make sure that you didn't forget a section, you didn't copy and paste the right way, you didn't cut something out. Just go over it a couple of times. And I always like to leave it aside, get up the next day after I had, and just look at it with a fresh set of eyes, send it over to someone else to take a look at it. But it's always important to review, edit, and make sure that you have all the things correct and you're saying it the way you want to say it. So what shouldn't you do? We talked a little bit about that, but I just want to hammer home a few points about what you shouldn't do. And the first thing you shouldn't do is wait till the last minute, like I do. I'm very good at waiting till the last minute to do stuff. Some of my best grant proposals came at the last minute, but I don't suggest that. My staff is always nervous and they're working a little hard, wondering if I'm going to get it done, and then I'm calling them at the last minute. So don't do that to yourself and don't do it to them. Don't apply to every grant. Number one is like, don't take the shotgun approach, but really look at grants that apply to your business and also apply, as I talked about it, the mission of the granting organization, right? Because that's very important. It's just like you wouldn't apply for a job to, to every company just because they had a job opening. You don't do that with grants as well. And even as a business owner, everybody isn't your customer. So you're not trying to sell on everybody, but you're trying to look at a very targeted market. Don't focus on your needs. I need the money. I need to hire people. No, you want to hire people because you want to build neighborhood and the economic wealth of the neighborhood. So now the message isn't on you. Now it's on something good. And, it will help your business. But first and foremost, grants are out there to help others, right? And so don't focus on what it can do for you specifically in your business, but focus on what it can do for the community as a whole. Don't overestimate your budget, because if you do, chances are you won't get the money. And that's in cases where, say, a federal grant, and they're looking for you to tell how much you need to do this project. And if you go way over what's reasonable and customary, as they say, chances are you won't get it. Don't be generic or forgettable, which most people tend to be. So really think about what is your real differentiation when you're applying for grant proposals. And then don't assume the reader understands your organization, industry, or mission, but also don't spend 20 pages trying to get them to understand it. Clear, concise, right? Keep it short, keep it concise, but find those words that adequately describes what your business is, what your mission is, and what you're trying to do. Should you hire a grant writer? That's always the important question. And in many instances, unless you're applying for a $300,000 grant, I wouldn't. You probably can do it yourself. So I say it depends. And most of the grant opportunities that are coming out for small businesses, they're pretty simple. So don't worry about that. And one of the reasons is that grant writers are very expensive. I know I do grant writing. I don't like doing grant writing, but when I do, I charge a whole lot of money to do grant writing. But usually I encourage people to do it themselves and then just pay me to review it, which is a lot cheaper. But if you don't have the expertise in that, and don't have good writing skills, you don't have the bandwidth to do it, or if you want somebody who has a lot of experience, say like myself, I have a lot of experience in writing USDA grants and very successful at them. Uh, People will hire me to do that because they know they will have a better chance of success. But we're talking now grant proposals that could be $400,000, $500,000 over, say, 3 years. But if you're applying for a $10,000, $20,000 grant, I'd say take your chances on writing it yourself, and then having someone with some experience to take a look at it. And then also, as I was saying, the smaller grants, application process is really simple. I mean, they just really want to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going to help the community in most of these grants. And so just take a stab at it yourself, and then have someone you know who's a good writer to take a look at it and help you work out the kinks in the system if there are some. And then we talked a little bit about this. Is there a limit on the number of grants you should pursue? And of course, the answer is yes. You don't have time to write grants. You are running a business. So I would say run your business more than you're trying to write grants, and really put that focus on revenue. So, no, there's no magic number, but if it makes sense to you and you're going to get a good return on investment, a possible return on investment, I'd say do so. In my instance, and a couple of the companies that I own, some, we just stopped writing grants. It's in these times because we looked at it and said we're going to focus more on revenue, and we'll let those other businesses that really, really need the money uh, apply for those grant opportunities while we look at our long-term uh, prospects. I'm sorry, especially for revenue, and start building on those, because we could spend a lot of time writing grants, and grants going to go away, but we need customers that are going to stay for a long time. And once again, it comes down to time and resources. And so we decided that we want to spend our time and resources on really trying to develop a more customer base, a larger customer base, and more revenue. And always, quality is more important than quantity. So I'd rather put in 5 dynamic grant applications than 25 poor grant applications. And you shouldn't be putting in 25 grant applications anyway. So stick to about five or less. And then what do you do after you succeed in a grant application? Now that's a tough one. Now I will talk about quickly one of the clients that I have now, and they were a for-profit business. They were awarded a USDA grant, and they didn't realize all of the crazy stuff that comes along with compliance in the USDA grant. So they're just chugging along, doing the work, and then especially with USDA grants, you have to do the work, pay everybody, and then apply for reimbursement, which isn't really a grant. They call it a grant, but I call it a contract. And so what ended up happening was the USDA said you're out of compliance in everything, and so we're not paying you. So they had to hire us then to come in and fix all the issues that they had with the USDA so they can get paid. Now, the beauty of it is the USDA is allowing them to pay us out of the grant funds. So it's not coming out of their pockets directly, but it is being paid through the grant funds. But you have to be very careful about that. And so, number one, they're going to require reporting. And any grant application, well, most of them, I would say 99% of them, they're going to require some type of reporting. So the question is, even when you write your grant application, then how do you measure success, right? And but that has to be in line with the mission. So some of it is, jobs created. That's a really simple one. It could be revenue increase. Could be the fact that hey, we stayed open. It's just that simple. We stayed open, which is a difficult thing to do these days. So that would be a remarkable thing. But in others, it just really depends on the mission. You assisted others in doing something. Say, I worked for a nonprofit organization years ago, and our whole thing was how many businesses did we assist, and so we have to report that to our funders. Did they get increases in revenue and things like that? And we still do that type of work. Um, and then I talked about the auditing, right? And that is really important. Now, usually with small grants, that doesn't happen. They do require a report. But if you start looking at some larger grants, they're going to do audits because they want to make sure that the money that was spent for program purposes and program purposes only. So when you're doing large grants, you pretty much have to keep a separate set of books and make sure that every dollar is accounted for, not and including staff time. In most instances, companies that normally don't have and organizations that normally don't have time clocks and time sheets, they make people fill out time sheets so they can say you spent X amount of time on this project because it's really important to know how the money was spent. And if you're dealing with the government and one of their grants and you can't properly do that, if they gave you the money, they're going to ask for it back. And then reporting, just a final thought, reporting is extremely important because part of it is it helps the grantors know that their programming was effective. And if it was, they're going to put out more money for those types of programs and projects. So if you do a good job in terms of taking the dollars, doing what you're supposed to do with them, making a difference, chances are there's going to be more money coming down to help with those types of programs and projects, not only from one grantor, but others, and that increases opportunities to get grants. So, as I close, and I hope everybody enjoyed this, I want to give you some parting words of advice. And that is grants can be great financial tools for working through this current crisis. But remember, you have to stay focused on increasing revenue. Grants are a stopgap, not a long term solution. So, good luck with applying for grants. And in Urban Strategies, www.urbanstrategies.com, info@urbanstrategies.com. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them for you. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Goodbye.